Welcome, everyone. 欢迎 Anin Bonjour. We're gathered here today in virtual space, and like many of you, I live, work, and play in Treaty 20 Michisaukit territory, the traditional territory of the Michisaukit and Chippewa nations, which are collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. My name is Yvonne Lai. I'm the Director of Community Development here at the New Canadian Centre. And many of us on this call today support English language learners. And in preparing for this land acknowledgement, I was reminded of how access to traditional languages was cut off and demonized for generations of Indigenous peoples in Canada's history, and that reclaiming the teaching and the use of these languages is key to reconciliation. As you know, language is a big part of our identity. And I wanted to share a short passage with you from a lovely author, Richard Watermees, from his book, One Story, One Song. And in the chapter, Talking the Talk, he writes, when you lose your original language, your identity is altered. You feel clumsy walking around in your own skin. That's true not just for Indians, but for immigrants, anyone who has sought another shore in pursuit of a dream. Society asks everyone who's been displaced to surrender parts of themselves in order to be accepted, and language is often the first thing to go. Reclaiming your language is like coming home. We're very honored today to have Michael Fierheller introduce us to the creative and constructive use of artificial intelligence in the classroom. Michael is an ESL instructor and the Instructional Technology Coordinator for Trent-ESL department. He holds a Master of Education from Ontario Tech University and has been an ESL instructor and instructional designer for more than 20 years. As part of his duties with Trent-ESL, Michael investigates and oversees the implementation of emerging instructional technologies. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yes, as Yvonne mentioned, I'm Michael Fierheller, and I'm currently working at Trent University in the ESL program. And one of the hot topics for the last 18 months or so has been artificial intelligence. I'm sure you've been seeing it all over the news and everywhere else as well. And I think with new technology comes fear, but also hope. And so today I'm here to talk a little bit about how we as language instructors might be able to look at artificial intelligence in a positive way, and how we might be able to integrate some of the powerful features of AI into our own teaching practices, and how we can introduce AI to our students to help them to become more independent learners as well. But before I get too much into that, I was just kind of wondering about everyone else's experience with AI. I'm interested in your opinion of AI. So I thought we might just start with a little discussion slash chat. So I'm just wondering, when I say to you AI or AI in education, what comes to mind? What do you think of? What's your first reaction to that idea? So feel free to turn on your microphone. You can raise your hand if you like. Throw something in the chat as well. What does AI in education mean to you?
I used to teach online for a little bit, Michael, and AI in education signals to me, unfortunately, an opportunity for dishonesty. Yeah.
I get that. Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, we've been hearing that a lot recently. And Julianne says, AI in education presents both opportunities and threats. I completely agree. Let's see. We've got.
I think I would just add in general that AI does create some hesitancy and some reluctance because it is very different and very different from sitting beside or in front of someone and gauging their level of comprehension or that kind of thing. So in general terms, but yeah, a bit of hesitancy and what would be lost. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. And we have a couple of other chat comments. Unfortunately, I think it has a negative association. Students will cheat. Wendy says, it's a new and evolving technology. I don't understand it well enough to get a good sense of trust. Yeah, I mean, what you guys are saying, it's completely understandable. And I think that's where we were at Trent on December 1st, 2022. Now, I don't know if you remember, but the most famous of these new chatbots, these AI chatbots, is ChatGPT. The ChatGPT 3 was released on November 30th, 2022. So this is a kind of an important date in the history of, or the evolution of AI, let's say. So on that date, the educational technologists, instructors, basically we all went into a panic because the first thing we did when we heard about this the latest release of ChatGPT was we tried it out, and what we realized was this thing is really good. So we can give it a prompt just like we would to a student, and this thing can produce something that's pretty good. An essay prompt. We can ask it to perhaps write a reflection on an experience. We could ask it to summarize an article, and these chatbots are able to do that. And I think from the perspective of an ESL instructor, it was even scarier, because while the output of these chatbots may not be what we would consider natural English, they're compared to what an English learner is able to produce, they're really good. And the chatbots are able to use structures that we teach our students. For example, when we teach them how to write a paragraph or how to structure a simple essay, these chatbots can do just that at a level that is very similar to what the students are able to do. So needless to say, we were in a panic for 6 months, 8 months. The university was looking at our academic honesty and integrity policies. We were looking at ways that we could possibly prevent students from using AI. We looked at things like AI detectors to try to figure out if an essay or whatever had been written by AI. But 1 year, or 1+ years on, of course, we're still worried about cheating, academic integrity, and so on. But we're kind of moving into a new phase now. And I think what's happening is teachers and instructional designers are looking for ways to actually use AI. And the reason is we've realized that this technology is not going away. And if anything, it's expanding throughout our society exponentially. It's moving into many fields of employment, and it's more and more being used in education as well. So rather than trying to prevent or limit the use of AI, we're looking to ways to actually introduce AI to our students, to have them use it in a productive way, in our case to enhance their language learning, and also to prepare them for the work that they're going to have to do in the future, which for pretty much everyone is going to include some use of this kind of AI technology. So while we are scared of this technology, while we're still trying to figure it out, and while we are concerned about cheating, what I'm going to try to do today is encourage you to think about AI as a useful tool, a tool that can enhance the learning of languages, not just limit the learning of languages by allowing students to cheat on your assignments or whatever it is. By the way, has anybody tried ChatGPT or one of the other language models? Like, have you played around with it? Christina, I see you're nodding your head. Is that a yes? And Elaine as well? Yes.
I had attended a conference earlier this year, and my eyes were wide awake after that, as to all the things that we could have done.
Tell us about it. What did you pick up from the conference? Or
so I'm a previous teacher. I taught for 32 years. I'm now retired, and just the way that they could design lessons now seems so much faster than when I started. So I was just that for me was like, wow, like the things that you can do with AI now, like taking a text and creating questions or simplifying, adding, it was just amazing as to all the things that you can do to support your learners.
And have you tried any of that in your own teaching context? Oh, sorry, Christina, you muted yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to unmute. I am now retired, but I'm working with language tutors, so I'm supporting them and giving them this information so that they can take this out and use it with their learners.
Awesome, thank you. And does anybody else want to chime in?
Well, my experience with it is completely outside of the education area, but I'm a volunteer with NCC in the tutoring area, so I'm intrigued to know how to include it, but use it in almost every day now with respect to work with human resources and with we work a lot with apprentices and a variety of other ways, and have definitely had eyes opened to that and eager to have eyes open to the how we can make it work in the education and with respect to tutoring. So.
That's great. So just out of curiosity, are you finding that AI helps you to do your work a little more efficiently, like in terms of the HR? Like I'm imagining using AI to say write an email or something like that.
We're finding it very helpful. Lots of people don't have the expertise and experience to begin to craft things like I work for the government, so things like briefing notes, and not that the AI would provide everything that you need with respect to those kinds of communications, but it certainly can provide a lot of structure for people who are unfamiliar with it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Great. Thanks, everybody. So let's move on. So I've been talking about AI, and I threw out ChatGPT. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, but maybe I'll just give you a little overview of the plan for today. So first of all, I'm just going to quickly talk about what is artificial intelligence. I'm not a computer technologist. I'm an educational technologist, so I'm not an expert. I'm not going to dive into the nuts and bolts of how these systems work, but I'll kind of define it for today's presentation. Then I wanted to talk about AI from the student side. So how can we use, or how can we possibly use AI to make our lessons or our tutoring more individualized, and how can we promote more self-directed learning through the use of AI? And then from the teacher's perspective, how can we use AI to save time? And I think this is one of the big advantages, as we've already kind of touched on a little bit. When you're using AI, you can possibly save yourself a lot of time when it comes to preparing lessons or preparing materials and things like that. So I wanted to talk about that and possibly give you some examples as well. And then, of course, not to be all sunshine and rainbows, I'll talk about the limitations and concerns with AI as well, because of course there are a number of those. I'm going to be quite positive during this presentation. I'm a proponent of AI, and I think teachers and tutors should be using this technology and learning about it. But of course, it's early days, and there are things that we need to be worried about. But let's just start by thinking about what AI is. Actually, AI has been around for a while. You've probably used it in your daily lives without really noticing. If you've ever written an email with predictive text on, and Gmail or Outlook has suggested the next word in your email, that's AI. If you've ever had a chat with your bank, and it's not a real person, that's AI as well. But what I'm going to be talking about today is the large language models. The most famous of those right now is probably ChatGPT, which has been all over the news and so on. But there are a couple of other ones that I've been using. One is from Microsoft. That's a Microsoft Copilot. And the other is the recently released Google Gemini. But all of these are actually quite similar. They're basically, what they are is very fancy text predictors. So just like your email will suggest the next word in your sentence, these systems predict the most likely word to come next, or in this case, a little bit more than a word, perhaps a paragraph, or perhaps even a short essay or something like that. But it's all prediction based on the experience of the system. So the key element here is the training that these systems get. And really what has happened is the companies like OpenAI or Google have been training their AI by exposing them to millions and billions of sentences, taken from all over the internet, from books, from blog posts, websites, papers that students have submitted to plagiarism checkers. Like, all of that's getting analyzed by these systems, and the system is using its experience and its recognition of patterns to create new text. Does that kind of make sense? I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. So what does that mean for us practically? Well, there are some things that something like ChatGPT can do, and there are some things that it can't really do. So what it can do very well is generate coherent responses to various prompts. So if you write a prompt, ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot will try to respond to that. It could be anything you like. It could be write me a poem in the style of Shakespeare about Nintendo Switch or whatever it is, and ChatGPT will do that for you, and you'll get something coherent, grammatically correct, spelled correctly, the punctuation's great, and so on and so on. And really, there's no end to the types of prompts you could give a system like this, really. And what can it do well because of this ability? Well, of course, it can do things like translating very well. I don't know if anybody's tried to use something like ChatGPT in another language. It's excellent as a bilingual communicator. So if you tell ChatGPT, hey, I'm a student of Japanese and I'd like to practice my Japanese. Let's have a conversation in Japanese. ChatGPT will switch to Japanese, and you can speak in Japanese for a while, and then you might say to ChatGPT, hey, I want to practice my French now. Let's use French, and it'll just go ahead and do that. And of course, with documents as well, if you've got a document in another language that you'd like to have in English, the app will do that for you. Similar to what Google Translate will do, right? Of course, it's also great with summarizing. So you could take an article that you found somewhere, feed it into one of these language models, and ask it to write, let's say, a 150-word summary of that article. It'll do it. And it looks pretty good. Is it perfect? Maybe not. There might be a little bit more copying than we would want from a student. Normally in our classes here at Trent, we're asking our students to paraphrase the articles. Maybe ChatGPT wouldn't do that as well as a human could, but it's still pretty good. And then, of course, writing any type of text. So the standard output that we look for here at Trent is an essay. We're often asking our students to write essays or paragraphs. ChatGPT is great at that, but it'll do anything: songs, poems, emails, resumes, whatever you can think of. And Tanya, I see Tanya's got her hand up. Tanya, go ahead.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. Oh. Hi, Michael. Thanks. I guess as you were speaking and you were saying it can do translation, I was wondering, what is the accuracy of the translation? Because we find that with Google Translate, it's not always very accurate.
Yeah, I think it would probably be on par with Google Translate. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but it'll be grammatically correct. So you have to remember that these systems are not understanding whatever the source material is, let's say the paragraph that you're trying to translate. It doesn't understand it at all. It's predicting the best answer. So it'll make it grammatically correct. It'll use the correct spelling and things like that. But will it pick up on the nuance of that in that message? Will it understand the idioms that have been used, or other kind of higher level communication elements? Possibly not. I'm not particularly fluent in any other languages, but I do speak some Japanese, and I have used it in Japanese, and I've found it to be quite good. Like I use it as a communication partner to help me practice, and I find it, at least for my level, it's quite accurate. I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, I guess just in summary, I wouldn't put all of my faith in any of these large language models as the final translator. I think we still want to proofread. We still want to have a fluent speaker or whoever do a bit of editing and so on. Right. Okay. So that being said, these tools can do quite a bit, but it's not perfect. We still have some problems. As I mentioned, these models like ChatGPT, they can't use any common sense. They don't have any real world experience. They can't go beyond their training, right? So they've been trained on a finite set of inputs, of texts, and that's what they know. They don't know anything else beyond that. Also, as I mentioned, they're not understanding the input at all. This is not these systems are not what we would consider intelligent in the way that we would hope that a human is intelligent and able to, understand a concept or understand some kind of input like a text or whatever it is in a deep way. So they're not understanding anything beyond the words, really. Also, some other things to watch out for. I don't know if you've ever had a long conversation with one of these chatbots, but they tend to forget. So they don't have a long memory. So you may start a conversation, and after 2 or 3 steps in that conversation, if you try to refer back to the first step, it will often forget. So that's something to be careful with. And actually, that's one of the reasons why these the companies that have created these tools often limit the number of questions you can ask in a single chat, because the more questions you ask, the more the chatbots get off topic, and the more hallucinations they have. So meaning they start to make stuff up, or they start to misunderstand things and so on. So something to think about if you were going to use one of these chatbots to say help your students practice. You wouldn't want to have them asking 30 questions or something like that. You want to keep it short. And then, of course, the last one is these bots are not in any way creative. So they will give you original language. So they're not plagiarizing. They're not copying the sentences that they give you from somewhere else, but they're also not able to start from nothing. So they're following patterns. They're following patterns of essays that they've seen before. They're collecting information from websites or books or whatever it is. So nothing is original yet. And I think that's, of course, the next step. So sometime soon, probably in all of our lifetimes, we're going to see that creative AI, but we don't have it just yet. Okay. Does anybody, I'll pause for a moment. Does anybody have a question or comment?
It may be
Okay.
something that you're going to cover later, Michael, so I don't want to preempt anything.
That's okay, go
but
ahead.
I'm just curious to know, you described the 3 LLMs currently. Are they competing, or do they each offer something different, or what's your take on that? Or if it's something you're going to cover later, that's
No,
fine as
so
well.
I'm not really going to get into the like the nuts and bolts of the business or anything like that. But no, it's an interesting question. So yeah, so they are. I would say that ChatGPT and Copilot from Microsoft are cooperating. So actually, Copilot uses the same language model that ChatGPT does, but it's got a layer of Microsoft stuff on top of it. So each of these models has a different personality, and you'll have to do some experimentation with them because you'll find that you don't get the same answers or even the same style of answer from all three. Like, for example, I've found ChatGPT is great for having a natural conversation. Like if I want to say have a student practice I don't know, role play speaking to a waiter at a restaurant, I would have them go to ChatGPT because ChatGPT will have quite a natural conversation with them, whereas Copilot tends to if I did the same activity with Copilot, Copilot would tend to give me much longer answers, and would sound more like almost like an encyclopedia or something like that. So if I asked Copilot like what items are on the menu, it would give me like a bullet point list with a description of each item, and it wouldn't sound natural. Whereas ChatGPT would sound like a real person having a conversation often. And then Google's Gemini is a little different as well. It's got its own personality. It's newer. It doesn't use the same system that ChatGPT and Copilot do. But it's also great because it's Google. It's linked into things like YouTube or and so on. So, for example, if you want an AI to give you a list of videos to on a particular subject, Gemini is great because it's linked right into YouTube. It'll give you a nice list with links and so on, like that. So they're all different, and I would say you have to experiment, and you have to think about what you want from the chatbot. But,
thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Okay, so let me move on. So the next thing that I wanted to just touch on is like how we can use these chatbots with our students. And for me, the benefit to using something like this is twofold. One piece that I'm really excited about is the ability to personalize learning using a bot like this. And this may be a little bit different for some of you. If you're tutoring one-on-one, of course, you've got the ability to tailor your lesson to that student. In my case, I'm teaching classes of anywhere up to 23 students. So the traditional way to teach a class like that is often to teach to the middle. So we're going to find that language level that's somewhere in between the lowest and the highest level student. But with these chatbots, we almost have like a teaching assistant. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do depending on the level of the students or even the needs of the students with these chatbots. One example might be something like a conversation partner. So a low-level student might need a much simpler conversation than a high-level student does. And depending on the prompts that you give to these chatbots, they will adjust their language to that situation. Right? So things like that, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. The other thing is, of course, is self-directed learning. So, of course, really, our goal as teachers and tutors is often, or should be, to have our students become independent of us. We want them to not need us anymore. And I think tools like this can be really helpful when it comes to that. So we can use, by introducing the students to these tools and giving them some assistance, we can show them how they can use these tools to actually study on their own, or to look for resources and things like that. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I've touched on this a couple of times already because it's one of my favorite things. But really, one of the things that I've been using ChatGPT and also Google Gemini for recently is as a conversation partner, a speaking partner. Of course, we could also think of it as a texting partner. One thing to think about with ChatGPT, if you're using the free version, it actually doesn't have the ability to, it doesn't accept spoken input. However, there is a way around that. Actually, there are several, but I'll just recommend one that you might find interesting. There's a Chrome extension that's called Voice Control for ChatGPT. So if you're using a Chrome browser, just go to the Chrome web store and you should be able to find this. And what it does is it creates a speech to text input for ChatGPT. So when this extension is running and when you have ChatGPT open, you'll be able to click on the little microphone icon and you'll be able to speak to ChatGPT. And then ChatGPT will answer, and there's a little microphone under ChatGPT's answer, and you'll be able to listen to the answer. So instead of having a text-based conversation, you can have your students practice speaking and listening while interacting with these chatbots. And here's an example of something that I actually did. On the left, this is ChatGPT. I said, please help me practice my English. Let's imagine we are in a restaurant. You are a waiter named Jenny. I am a customer. You begin the conversation. And then Jenny started by saying, good evening. Welcome to our restaurant. My name is Jenny, and I'll be your server tonight. Do you have a reservation? Would you like a table for two? And so on. And then the rest of this conversation happened orally, rather. So I wasn't typing. One thing you do notice about this is there's no punctuation or anything like that. So if you're interested in teaching students correct capitalization or use of periods and things like that, it's not great because it's not doing that. But if the goal is to practice listening and speaking, you may find it useful. Another thing to think about is Google Gemini or Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. They do allow for audio input in the free version. So there's a microphone on the page. You just, instead of typing, you just click on the microphone and speak, and you can do basically the same thing. And Google Gemini is a little bit more advanced when it comes to editing. So you might notice that my conversation here is punctuated correctly. Well, not perfectly, but it's pretty good. So there's capitalization and periods and things like that. Okay, so one thing to try. I'll pause there for a moment. Does anybody have a question? This one's kind of exciting. I like it. By the way, I have to thank my former colleague Trevor Laughlin. I don't know if any of you have met him. He's been a teacher around Peterborough for a long time, but he's the one who turned me on to this technology. Everybody's okay, right? Okay, so a couple of other things then. We can also use ChatGPT to generate examples of different texts. So for example, let's say you're teaching a lesson on resume writing. Of course, you might have a textbook or whatever that's got an example, but ChatGPT will also create examples for you. On the left, you can see an example resume. The prompt that I wrote was write a resume for a new graduate named John Smith, who is applying for a job in a restaurant. And ChatGPT did that. My screenshot only has a piece of the resume. It actually wrote the whole thing. I just didn't want to put the whole thing on the slide. And of course, if you add more information to your prompt, it's going to create a more precise result. So, whatever it is, address, work experience, things like that, you could add all those things in. One thing I would say, be very careful about having students put personal information into ChatGPT or any of these apps. They are collecting and storing information. We're not 100% sure of how they're using that information, or who gets access to it. So if you were doing something like a resume, of course, you probably wouldn't want students to put in a lot of personal information. And then, Copilot on the right there does something very similar. This time it was a cover letter, same idea. It writes a really nice example. So this is something that, of course, students could use to cheat, because they could have ChatGPT or Copilot write a resume for them if that was an assignment in your class. But hopefully they're not doing that, because they they want to learn, and hopefully they're using it to generate an example that they can then follow. Okay. Maybe I'll move on. Of course, another way we can use, our students can use ChatGPT or one of these other chatbots, is as a writing assistant or tutor. One thing that I've been playing around with this term is actually using ChatGPT to analyze paragraphs written by students, to look for grammar errors, and to even give to generate feedback. And that's what you can see on the left here. So what I've done is I've given the prompt, list the grammatical errors in this paragraph, and then I've copied and pasted a paragraph from a student, and then ChatGPT has made an attempt to find the errors, suggest corrections, and then occasionally to even try to explain the problem. And this is kind of, it's good, but it's not great. So ChatGPT is very good at finding the errors, and it's actually really good at correcting the errors, especially if we're talking about low-level students. So if your students are new to Canada and they don't have much English yet, something like this can really help them to find errors, right? One thing I would caution you about is the explanations of the errors. It seems like these bots are not great at that, and they'll often, not often, but they'll sometimes make up reasons for the correction. So they might say, for example, it's, I don't know, a subject verb agreement issue or whatever, but that might not actually be the case. So I would be very cautious. You wouldn't want to just use this app and then you wouldn't just want the students to use this app and then not go beyond that. So you have to think about, you have to encourage your students to think about the feedback that they get from the app, and use their prior knowledge and try to figure out if it's correct or not. But it is definitely a useful tool. And then, of course, again, as a tutor or as an assistant, these apps can also create outlines for us. It's great for figuring out the structure of standard documents, like, for example, an email or let's say an essay or something like that. So on the right, I gave the prompt, create an outline for an email for an international student to her parents back home. And Copilot has suggested some ideas for the subject line, the opening paragraph, the body paragraph, and so on. So here, it's not giving the actual text. It's not creating sentences. It's just kind of outlining, planning the email. So I can imagine that would be very useful for the types of students that you're teaching as well. I'll pause there for another moment. Any questions or comments? Good. And so one other piece that I think is great in terms of students is using these chatbots to find resources. So of course they may have a textbook from your class or whatever it is, but there's so much more out there on the internet. And of course, you can go into Google and do a Google search or whatever, but I really like the way that these chatbots curate responses. So for example, I asked Copilot to find 5 websites that explain simple past tense, and it gave me a nice list. I didn't put them all here, but here's the first one. It's also a hyperlink, so you can just click on it and it'll take you to the website. And one of the great things about these lists is they normally have some kind of summary of the article or the website, so you get a kind of an overview of what it's about, which I really like. Same thing, of course, with videos. So as I mentioned, Gemini is Google. So if you're looking for YouTube videos or something like that, I recommend Gemini. Again, find 5 videos on discussion strategies. It gave me a nice list, again, with hyperlinks. So you just click on them and it'll take you there. And I can imagine, so students using this, right? Because, it's pretty hard for a student to get onto Google and look for a grammar point or whatever it is. But I think ChatGPT or these other chatbots can do it in a really accessible way. Okay. So just to sum up there, one way that we can be using ChatGPT is customizing lessons to individual students using the AI, and encouraging the students to do more learning on their own using the AI. But of course, there are always cautions there, right? We have to watch out for protecting the personal information of students. We need to watch out for errors that the systems may be making. While they're good examples, like for example, the example resume or whatever it is, there may be there may be errors, probably not grammar errors or things like that, but more errors with organization or content. there, you know, there may be things that you're hoping to have in your lessons or your examples that the AI is not doing or creating. So it's worth you know, taking a look at what's being generated, or guiding the students as they use what's being generated. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears now, and I just wanted to talk about some of the ways that we as instructors or tutors may be able to use AI to save some time. And I'm really excited about this as well. I know my coworkers are too. So let me talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to just touch on things like lesson plans. I think Christina mentioned that a little bit earlier. I'll talk about creating materials. We can talk about suggesting activities and vocabulary, creating activities, proofreading and feedback, and believe it or not, even marking is possible to greater or lesser success. So let's talk about that a bit. So one thing that ChatGPT seems to be able to do really well is create lesson plans. I don't know if anybody's tried it, but if you give it a detailed prompt, it'll give you a detailed lesson plan. So give it a topic, give it the level of your language learners, your grammar targets, possibly the vocabulary list if you've got a list of, say, 10 words that you're trying to teach, and it'll generate a standard lesson plan for you. I don't have the whole thing here. Again, I couldn't fit it all on the slide, but you know, it's got an objective, it's got materials, and then if we went a little farther, there would be a warm-up activity, there would be a presentation section, a production section, and so on. So it's all laid out nicely for you. So what does this mean? I think it depends on your level of experience, but you know, if you're a new teacher or you're dealing with, say, new tutors who aren't used to planning a lesson, this is probably a very useful aspect of these chatbots. Somebody who's a little more experienced, you might find the structure of these lesson plans a little confining, and of course they get a bit repetitive too, because again, the app is not being creative, it's just following that standard pattern. So it's going to give you the same type of lesson plan every time, but especially for new teachers or you know, inexperienced tutors, I think this is a useful tool. Another thing, of course, is creating materials. Part of my job here at Trent has been to design and create courses. And you know, one of the things that has taken the longest is finding readings and listenings. Because we're not creating original readings, we're taking them from websites or magazines or newspapers or whatever, and we're not creating original video or listening activities. We're finding them on YouTube and things like that. But one thing that ChatGPT or one of these other bots can do is they can write content for you, and it's the same thing. We want to give it a really detailed prompt, and with that prompt it will create something for you. So here I just used a really short prompt: write a short article about Canadian food, and it ended up writing a really nice article. It was something like 800 words. You can see the one piece was about poutine here, but then it went on to list, I think, 5 or 6 other Canadian, like traditional Canadian foods. So instead of spending 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, going online trying to find that perfect article for your lesson, you can use chatbots to create something. Does it mean it's going to be perfect when it comes out? No, but you can ask these bots to make changes, right? For example, you might find that the vocabulary level's too high. You can ask the bot to rewrite in simpler language, or vice versa. You may find that the article is too long. You can ask ChatGPT to or one of these other bots to rewrite, make it 25% shorter, that kind of thing. So you can really customize these texts, and it'll do the same thing with, say, a listening script. So maybe you still have to record that conversation or whatever it is, but it'll write the script for you. So again, saving a lot of time. The only caution here is, well, I guess two cautions here. One is, again, repetitive structure. So when you ask it to write an article or an essay or things like that, it's very repetitive. So if an essay is always like a 5-paragraph essay, and it doesn't really deviate in terms of the style, right? It's a topic sentence and a few supporting sentences and a concluding sentence and so on. So that's one issue. It could get a little boring. You might, so if you had one or two of these, in a session, it's probably fine. If you were doing one of these every week, it might get a little boring in terms of the structure. The other thing is bias. This list of Canadian foods is, traditional white European Canadian food. So there were no indigenous foods. There were no foods from other immigrant groups besides Europeans, right? So it's another thing to consider. So I don't know if people have been watching the news recently about the issues with Google's Gemini image generator. Have you seen that? Like it's biased, but in an almost in an opposite way. Like, for example, they're not using it right now because it has problems, but the image generator would not generate any white faces for people. It was only minority groups. So, for example, somebody tried to have tried to generate a picture of George Washington, and it was it was somebody who looked nothing like George Washington, and that kind of thing. So there's a lot to think about. So again, you can't just take what you're given. You might have to ask it, for example, to give a suggestion of a food that's from an indigenous group or another immigrant group, and it probably can do that. It's just it may not be the first result that you get. Did anybody have any questions about that?
I have a question
Yeah.
regarding another aspect of usage of this. For example, I was tutoring this morning, and my student had a difficult time pronouncing D-O-N-E. Could pronounce under, and I wish I could remember how that person did it. It might have been Dune instead of Don, or Doan, but I haven't run into this type of problem before, that after visualizing even the D-U-N, it still could not be pronounced. And so I'm wondering, could Copilot or any of the other AIs help with the pronunciation aspect of tutoring?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think you have a few different options here. So one is like you could just type in to, say, ChatGPT, like, how do you pronounce this word, and just put the word in quotes, and it will give you a text-based response. So it will explain the pronunciation to you. Now, depending on the level of the student, that might be too complicated, especially if they're, if they're just starting out with English. But think about other resources, so websites. So once you've identified a language issue, asking the chatbots to give you suggestions for websites that explain that particular pronunciation issue, whatever it is, long and short vowel sounds, or long and short O sounds, or whatever it is. The same thing with videos. There's a huge, if you go onto something like YouTube, you'll find there's a huge resource of pronunciation videos for all of the sounds of English, both, with British pronunciation and with American pronunciation. These chatbots can suggest videos on that topic, and of course those are things that you might use with your student in your class, or you could send them home with that as homework to do self-study. So I think, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. And then of course we can have ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini speak, but they're kind of limited in their voices. So for example, there's a British person, or there's an American person, but so, and the voices are quite natural, but not completely natural. So so you could have them actually play the sounds of those words as well, and you could of course put them into sentences and so on using the chatbots.
I just thought it was thank you. I thought it was very interesting that visualizing O-N-E or D-O-N-E, just the visualization had to change, even though the pronunciation used can be pronounced in under and other words, yet to visualize that change the pronunciation. And that was very interesting.
Great. So hopefully that was helpful, Cynthia.
Yes.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else while we're on this topic?
Just one thing that I learned at that conference was that you could ask GPT or with the other chat box to create articles to modify it according to the CLB level that you're working with.
Yes.
So that point. I thought was a really key point to kind of mention, that you can say, I need this at a CLB4, and it will create it at that level.
Yes. Yeah, it seems to be quite good. Like, so just because of where I'm teaching, we don't use CLB, but we use, like, for example, Common European Framework, or I've even tried it with IELTS levels. So, for example, an IELTS 5 or an IELTS 7 or things like that. And it does make an attempt. I would say, it's not perfect, so it's not going to be exactly at that level, but it does make a pretty good attempt. I would say it's best at something like low, intermediate, and advanced. So you're going to get at least 3 different levels of language for sure. But I know like with CLB, you've got 12 levels. I'm not sure if it's nuanced enough to say change your article between a 5 and a 6 or something like that, but definitely between a 3 and an 8, probably something like that. Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I just have a couple more pieces. Another thing we can do, of course, is to use these bots to suggest activities. I don't know about you, but I like to do a little warm-up activity with my students at the beginning of class. I've got 100 of them. I've probably got 200 of them in my head, but sometimes I just can't figure out what I want to do that day or whatever. So I'll just go to ChatGPT and I'll say, hey, suggest 5 warm-up activities for a low-level ESL class, and it'll give you a list. chances are, if you're an experienced teacher or tutor, you've seen a lot of these before. If you're new, you might get some great ideas. I find it useful just as inspiration. Like, oh, I haven't done that one for a while, and once in a while I'll get something completely new that I've never tried. So activities, if you give it a good prompt, I'm doing a speaking activity on this topic with this grammar. Give me 5 production activities or whatever it is, and it'll give you a list. So a great time saver there. The other piece is vocabulary. We just talked about generating articles. You can take the next step is to take that article and ask the bot to pull out vocabulary. So please select 10 words from this article that might be challenging for an ESL student, or perhaps it's a CLB 5 student or something like that. And it will do that. Maybe you have to make some changes. Maybe the list isn't as accurate as you want, but it'll at least give you a start, and that can be a big time saver, I think. Right? Or as I've done here, you can just generate a word list from scratch. So I asked ChatGPT to generate a word list for an intermediate ESL lesson on culture, and it gave me I think 20 words or something like that. And maybe you're not going to use all 20, but hopefully there's 8 or 10 words in there that you might find useful. So again, a nice time saver. Of course, you have those words in your head. You could do it yourself, but it's 20 seconds of time versus maybe, who knows, 20 minutes of time. And then going beyond that, of course, the next thing we can do is we can generate activities. So maybe we've got our word list from, we've had the bot generate an article. We've had the bot select vocabulary from that article. Now let's practice that vocabulary. So here, as an example, I had it create a gap filling activity with answers. So it'll give you sentences. So this is the kind of thing you could copy and paste into a Word document and hand out to your students or have them do it online. You're not limited to gap filling. It's great for matching activities, like, for example, definitions and vocabulary. And really whatever you want. So get as creative as you like. The only thing is that at this point, these apps are still text-based. So, for example, it's not gonna, if you ask it to create a crossword puzzle, it will create the hints, but it can't make your crossword puzzle squares yet. So things like that. So anything text-based works great. True, false, multiple choice as well, really good. Even you can even take an article that it's created or an article from somewhere else and have it create comprehension questions, so multiple choice, comprehension questions, even discussion questions. So it's quite good at that type of thing. Again, a big time saver. Okay, so just a couple other ones. Now we're getting into less reliable. This is a less reliable output, let's say. So of course, the other thing you can do, we already talked about it a little bit, is using something like this to do proofreading or to give feedback on student writing. You can ask ChatGPT or one of these other apps to make corrections. For example, on the left here, I asked the app, can you, is this paragraph grammatically correct? I pasted in the student paragraph, and ChatGPT corrected the paragraph. So the new version is grammatically correct. It's changed some of the vocabulary. So from that standpoint, it's quite good. But what do we do with this? So we can have, depending on the level of the students, maybe we're showing these corrections to the students, and we're having them compare their work to ChatGPT, and maybe thinking about whether they agree with the changes and things like that. But so it definitely has potential. And if you wanted to take that a step farther, you can actually have you can ask these bots to assess things beyond, say, spelling, grammar, punctuation. On the right here, I've actually asked Gemini to evaluate the content and the organization of a paragraph, and it has done it. The question is, do you agree with this output? And how accurate is this output? So we talked about how the chatbots are not really understanding the text in any deep way. So how is it coming up with this assessment of the work? Actually, we don't really know. I can't explain that to you. So you would have to have a look at this. So it's something that's coming. But I would say it's in its early stages now. I wouldn't trust this. I would never generate something like this and then just give it to a student. But I find it interesting to try it and then kind of compare what I think about the article or paragraph to what ChatGPT is saying. And sometimes I find that we do agree, and sometimes we disagree. But it's almost like it's a partner to do your marking with. But I wouldn't trust it just yet. And the last one I'll throw out there, again, it's in its infancy, but it's something to keep in mind, marking. So at some point, these bots are going to be able to mark tests and things like that. One thing that I've tried a few times is creating a rubric, a marking rubric using ChatGPT, so or one of the other apps. So it'll create a very basic rubric, but the more information you give it, the more refined you can make the rubric. So again, a time saver there. And you can input this rubric along with a piece of writing, and ChatGPT will try to mark that writing using the rubric. You can see that on the right here. I cut out a little bit, but so I fed a piece of student writing and a rubric to ChatGPT, and it came up with this feedback. So it's giving the student a mark, for example, on vocabulary. They got a 4 out of 10 based on the rubric, and there's an explanation of why that grade was given. Just like any old teacher would do. But again, do you agree with that mark? How was that mark generated? We don't really know, right? So it's not something we can rely on at this point, but it's something that's coming in the future. Okay. So I'll pause there for just a second. Any questions, comments? No. Okay, so I'll just say AI can be a big time saver for us. Planning lessons, generating material, creating activities. That's what it's good at right now. Other things, feedback, proofreading, marking, it's not there yet, but at some point it will be. Okay. And then one last piece. The last thing I wanted to talk about was just very briefly limitations and concerns. We've talked about a few of these already, but I'll just kind of go over them one more time. these chatbots are information vacuums. So they're just sucking up whatever we give them. So we have to be really careful about security and privacy. Oh, sorry, I'm going in the wrong order here, but so security and privacy, it's a big concern. If you're using these apps on your own, of course, don't be very careful with what you put into them. And of course, if we're having our students use them, let's also make sure that the students are aware that they need to be very careful about the information that they're putting into these chatbots. Sorry, let me go back up to the top. Another concern, of course, is if we're using automation to create our lessons, to create our materials, and so on, even to do our marking, perhaps, we're losing that personal connection with the students. So, so something to think about. You know, is it better to write our own activities so that they're specifically, you know, designed for our students, or can we have something more general created by an AI, right? I think it's case by case, and different teachers have different opinions on this, as far as I can tell. Of course, we talked about bias as well. The algorithm is trained on websites, it's trained on Reddit, it's trained on blog posts, it's trained on you know, YouTube and all kinds of stuff, literature. But you know, it does have biases, you know, just like our society does, just like the internet does. So it's something to be aware of if you're creating material, if you're asking ChatGPT to comment on something. You know, you may get some ideas that that don't, you know, are not suitable for our multicultural you know, environment here in Canada, right? Also, accuracy and quality control. These apps don't like to say, I don't know. So they always answer, whether they know the answer or not. So you're going to get an answer that's grammatically correct and so on, but is it factually correct? Is the content correct? That's the question. So, you know, asking it to write you an article about, I don't know, the history of Canada or something like that, I'd be very careful about whatever you get. You'd have to double check dates, double check names, and so on, because it does make mistakes. However, if it's a general, if it's a general text, you know, say, you know, Johnny's summer vacation or whatever it is, it's going to create something useful for you. But I'd be very careful about trying to get anything factual from these bots. Of course, the other issue that has come up is teachers losing their creativity and the lessons losing their personalization. So if we're relying a lot on these apps, again, they follow patterns. So the lessons might get a little boring if you're relying on them too much, and the teachers might get into a rut. So if you're only relying on the activities that ChatGPT suggests, maybe your lessons might get a little boring over time. And I mentioned the security as well. Okay. So I better stop there. I know, sorry, I've been talking a lot. This is an exciting topic for me, and I could probably go on for another hour, but I know you guys are probably tired of listening to me talk. I think we have a couple of minutes left. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any, or I'd love to hear your comments or thoughts on anything that we talked about today.
Michael, this is a very fascinating topic, and it's very exciting as well. So it seems like there's all kinds of opportunities for us to be able to work with this AI technology to improve the quality of maybe what we're giving to our students at this point. So I'm excited to see it, start playing with some of this and downloading some things and getting my hands a little bit dirty with it. So thank you very much. It's been fascinating.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I'm happy to hear that comment from you, and I'm you know, in my own context here at Trent, I've been trying to motivate our instructors to do the same, and I hope all of you will as well.
I know, Michael, when we were talking about generating lists of activities, I never thought of using AI as a search engine. So, you know, if I was looking for icebreaker activities in the past, I would go to Google, and then you would have to sift through all that is Google. So while we were talking, I was actually going on to Gemini and giving it a try, and yeah, not having to go through all the noise of Google, I think, is also another thing about using AI.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, I don't know the answer to this, but I've often wondered, like, if the answers that you get through the bots might be a little bit more pure. Like, you know, like with Google, you know, advertisements or paid results get ranked higher. So you might, you know, the first 5 results might be sponsored links or something like that. But I don't think that's the case with the chatbots, although I have no real evidence of that. So yeah, but yeah, that's great. I'm glad you tried it out. Yeah.
I find if you if you ask it for specific, so let's say icebreakers, give me the top 10 icebreakers for this group of people. And it will be able, because if you give it the more specifics, it can give you better answers, is what I've been finding.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so I would recommend that for whatever you're doing. Yeah, be as specific as you can. And you know, maybe that first prompt, whatever it is, doesn't have to be that specific, but don't forget you're having a conversation with these bots. So you can have a follow-up question or a follow-up instruction to help it refine the results. And yeah, I think that can be quite useful. Yeah. Okay, well, great. So thanks everybody. I really enjoyed that. Thanks for indulging me and listening to me prattle away about AI. I hope you feel inspired to try this out. You know, the 3 chatbots that I talked about today are by no means the only ones available, but I chose them specifically because they have free versions. So you can just, you know, you have to sign up with your email or whatever it is, but so you have to give away a little bit of information, but not too much. And there's no reason to be paying for any of these tools right now, unless you have a really specific need that the free versions aren't filling. So I would recommend just sticking with the free ones. There's lots that you can do with them. I do have one more slide. It's just some additional resources, like some videos and things like that. So I don't know. I can share my slides with Yvonne. I don't know if you, or if or you can you could always email me. I'm Michael Fierheller at Trent-U.ca. I can always send you the slides as well if you like.
Yeah, if you send them to me, Michael, I can make sure that I send them to everyone who registered for this session and also attach it on the website as well.
Awesome.
These are they're hyperlinks?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Yeah, super. Great.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody. By the way, as I mentioned, I'm Michael Fierheller at Trent-U.ca. So if you ever have any questions about this topic or anything educational, technology related, I'm happy to chat.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Great day.
That was
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.